This discourse that we are learning, Basi LeGani, was published on the 9th of Shvat in 1950. The previous Rebbe published a 5-chapter discourse. It ended up being 20 each. They published it in 4 parts. The first 5 were published in honor of Yud Shvat that year, which was Shabbos, so it was published on Friday, and it was meant to be in honor of his grandmother's yahrzeit, which was on the 10th of Shvat, Rebbe and Rivka. It happened to be that the next morning, the previous Rebbe himself passed away, and Yud Shvat became his own yahrzeit. But this discourse is what he published in honor of the Shabbos of Yud Shvat in 1950. And in it, the Hasidim later realized that this discourse is kind of like his last will and testament in a way. And in it he hints about the fact that there's going to be a 7th Rebbe. And it's very clear in the beginning of the discourse, because he was the 6th. He talks about the 7 generations that, well, he begins to talk about, the gist of the first chapter was, so let me explain, a summary. The discourse is based on a verse in Shir Hashirim, in the Song of Songs, where King Solomon says, Basi LeGani achaisi kala, I came to my garden, my bridal chamber, my sister, my bride. That's what Shlomo Melech says. King Solomon writes in the Song of Songs. As you know, Song of Songs is a metaphor for the love of Hashem, the love that Hashem has for the Jewish people. He uses the metaphor of a husband and a wife. So he says that Hashem says, I came to my garden, to my bridal chamber. And the Rebbe says, he quotes a medrash, who says that when it says Legani, to my garden, it seemed that this was already once his garden. He's not coming to a new place. He's coming to a place that he already was once. What's he referring to? He's referring to when the Beis Hamikdash was built. Hashem says, I came to my garden. The Mishkan, that is, the tabernacle in the desert that was built through Moshe Rabbeinu. So God says then, that they invited me once again into my garden. My garden means somewhere I was already once before. When was God here before? When he created the world. The Medrash says that Hashem was here, his essence, the main essence of his Shekhinah, of his presence, was here when he created the world. But as a result of the sin of the tree of knowledge and the subsequent 6 sins, the essence of Hashem's presence was removed from the world. I mean, the revealed essence, the revealed state, in other words, it's always here, but it was removed from a revealed state, and it was removed from the earth. The first sin removed him from earth to the 7th, to the first heaven. The second sin removed him from the first heaven to the second heaven, and all the way till the 7th sin, which removed him all the way up to the 7th heaven. That's what the Medrash says. And then came 7 tzaddikim, starting with Avraham Avinu, and started to reverse that process. Avraham brought him back from the 7th heaven to the 6th. Yitzchak from the 6th to the 5th, all the way till Moshe, who Moshe is the 7th. Moshe being the 7th, he brought him down back to earth. And in this chapter, the previous Rebbe begins to discuss what it means to be brought down. Where is it? What does this mean that the essence of the Shekhinah was here before? And that because that was the ultimate desire, that Hashem wanted to be in this physical world, and so on and so forth. So let's read the summary. I know you don't have it in your copy, it's over here, but I'll read it anyway. It's a very short one. Just before we go into the 2nd chapter, let me read the summary of the first. The essence of the Shekhinah was apparent in the lower worlds, in our physical world. The chapter explains that the ultimate purpose of the world's creation is God's desire for a dwelling place in the lower worlds, in our world. This terrestrial abode is constructed through man's divine service. How do we create this abode, this home for Hashem? Through our divine service. What, and more particularly, what kind of service? Subduing and transforming his physical nature. When a person breaks, subdues his physical nature and then transforms it That is great. That's music to Hashem's ears. That brings Hashem's essence of the Shekhinah down here. In this manner, he causes the transcendent light of Seviv Kol Almin. The transcendent light. He began in the first chapter, he explained there's two different kinds of light of Hashem, the Mamar Kol Almin and Seviv Kol Almin. The light that infills the world, that's the lower light, and then there's the more encompassing light. It is that light that we bring into all worlds, even into our physical, mainly into our physical world, as a result of our subduing and transforming the physical nature. You understand? Okay, that was the summary of chapter 1. Chapter 2. The divine service in the Mishkan. The Mishkan is the temple that was built in the desert. The divine service in the Mishkan and in the Beis HaMikdash, later in Jerusalem, centered. What was the main? What we say in chapter 1? That where is Hashem's presence to be seen in most evident, most revealed and evident? In the Beis HaMikdash. That's where his essence was revealed, more than everywhere else. But in the Beis HaMikdash itself, what was the most fundamental part of the service? The Avodas HaKorbanos, the worship of the sacrifices, the animal sacrifices. Let's see what he says. The divine service in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and in the holy temple, the Beis HaMikdash, centered around the task of Birurim, the refining of materiality, through the subduing of man's physical nature. Let me explain what he's saying over here. Again, it's centered around the task of Birurim. What's Birurim? Birurim means purification. Purification in this sense means, for example, this world is a mixture of good and evil. Let's take this table, for example. This table is a mixture of good and evil. What is the meaning that it's a mixture of good and evil? It has a potential for both. In it is this godly spark that makes it exist. Otherwise, if there would not be a Koyach HaMahave, the godly power, the godly light, that spark that brings it into existence and keeps it into existence, it would revert back to nothingness, as it was prior to the world's creation. On the other hand, it's made up of physical nature, of physical matter, which gives it the ability to also be used for something terrible. This could be used in a bar, in a who knows where, for a very bad purpose. So our purpose, our job is to extract the good from the bad, to separate the good from the bad. Birurim means to be mevarer, to elevate those sparks, that godliness that's in every single physical creation, and to separate the good from the bad. So like this, if you take a table like this and you bring it into a Makom Kodesh, the holy place, and you learn Torah on it and so on and so forth, so you've taken away the evil from it and elevated and extracted only the good and separated the evil from it. It's now good. So that's the Avodah of the Beis HaMikdash in general. Let's read this again. It's centered around the task of Birurim, the refining of materiality. Through how? Through the subduing of man's physical nature. What is the biggest source of trouble in this world? Man's physical nature. Right? That's the source of all evil. So that's the first thing, the most important thing that has to be subdued, which brings one to the yet loftier goal of transforming darkness into light. This first you have to subdue it, to not let it rear its ugly head. They have a negative craving, you have to subdue it, not give in. But the ultimate goal, which brings one to the yet loftier goal of transforming it, to making it want only good. You understand the difference between subduing and transforming? Subduing is, a person has a negative nature, you subdue it. But the ultimate goal is to transform the person, so that he doesn't have a negative nature anymore. He changes his natural instincts. For this reason, one of the modes of divine service in the sanctuary was the offering of sacrifices. Yeah? This was not merely a physical act, the participation of the Kohanim and Leviim, who accompanied the offering with their hymns and musical instruments, demonstrates that these sacrifices were a spiritual mode of divine service taking place in man's soul. The fact that the Kohanim and the Leviim, who sang and they accompanied the whole thing with musical instruments, this was a whole divine service that was going on. This is obviously not just the slaughtering of an animal, sprinkling the blood and doing whatever else. This was something more, spiritual divine service that was accompanied, that was associated with the Aveda of Karbonis. Something was going on in the man's soul when he brought a korban. What is it? So he begins to explain, and that's what the bulk of this chapter is. In the personal sphere of man's service of God, the theme of a sacrificial offering is alluded to in the first verse in Vayikra, which discusses the beginning of the discussion of sacrifices. Over there it says, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lashem min ha-behema min ha-bakar min ha-tzein takrivos karbanchem, which means a man who shall bring from you an offering to God. I want you to read this very carefully, because the Rebbe is going to analyze this very much. It says there again, a man who shall bring from you an offering to God, of the cattle, of the herd, and of the flock shall you bring your offering. Now, the order of the opening words here is problematic. If the intention of the verse was simply to describe the laws of offering a sacrifice, a physical sacrifice, it would have said, a man of you who shall bring, and so on. But it doesn't say that. It says, a man, let's read again what it says, a man who shall bring from you. It doesn't say a man of you, among you who will bring a sacrifice. It says it differently. It says Adam, it doesn't say Adam mikem ki yakriv, a man among you who will want to bring a sacrifice. It says Adam ki yakriv miken, a man who will bring a sacrifice among you, from you. This is strange wording. In the Hebrew, it would make more sense to say a man among you who will bring a sacrifice. What's he trying to say in this mitzvah? That if any of you want to bring a sacrifice, this is how you do it. You bring either from the cattle or from the sheep. But saying a man who will want to bring a sacrifice from you, what does that mean? The sacrifice is from me. The sacrifice is from the animal, not from me. You understand the question? The problem here, do you? No?
No.
Okay, the grammar is, you should be a little familiar with the Hebrew grammar. If I want to give a mitzvah, God is speaking through Moses and he's telling the Jewish people. Let's say I'm Moshe and I'm talking to you about them, giving you over this mitzvah. What would be the right way to say a mitzvah? Basically the mitzvah is that anyone among you who wants to bring an offering in the temple, you should bring it either from cattle or from sheep. Can't bring a donkey. You have to bring a kosher animal, either cattle or sheep. So now, how should I say this mitzvah? In English, how would you say the mitzvah? Would you say, a man who wants to bring a sacrifice from you should bring a cattle or sheep? Or would you rather say, a man among you who wants to bring a sacrifice should bring it either from the cattle or from the sheep? Which way would you do it, the first or the second?
Second.
The second.
Right.
But he doesn't say it that way. He says it the other way. He says, a man who will bring a sacrifice from you should bring from the cattle or from the sheep. You follow? Let's read it again inside, so you get it. The second paragraph. In the personal sphere of man's service of God, the theme of the sacrificial offering is alluded to in the verse, a man who shall bring from you an offering to God of the cattle and of the herd and of the flock shall you bring your offering. The order of the opening words here is problematic. If the intention of the verse was simply to describe the laws of offering sacrifices, it would have said, a man of you, or man among you who shall bring it from the cattle and so on, yeah? Why does it say it the opposite way? As is well known, however, the transposition, a man who shall bring from you, shows that the verse intended to teach a fundamental principle of the sacrifices insofar as they are carried over into every man's personal service of God. What he's going to say here is, I'll just say briefly, this, by the way, this is a word from the Alter Rebbe, whose yahrzeit is today. Alter Rebbe, in his famous discourse in Likutei Torah, on this verse about sacrifices, he says like this, that the words are very, very specific here. The word that God chose to use is very specific, very, very, there's an intention as follows. What he's trying to say, what's a sacrifice? A Yid comes to the temple and brings an animal, and the Kohen shechts it, or someone else shechts it, and the Kohen does the offering of the blood, and so on and so forth, right? What was the meaning of this? You bring it either for atonement for a sin, or you want to thank Hashem for a good thing that happened to you. You bring a korban todah, a thanksgiving offering, or you came on the holidays, you brought a chagiga, you brought a festival offering, whatever. But you're killing animals in the Beis Hamikdash. What was the meaning of this? What exactly is pleasing to Hashem when you slaughter an animal and sprinkle its blood on the altar? And it says that this is a reach necheach l'Hashem. This is a pleasing aroma for Hashem. What is it about the sacrifice? So the Alter Rebbe says over there in this discourse that in this opening verse, the Torah gives us the hint, not even a hint, it's a clear indication of what the meaning of the sacrifices are. That the sacrifice has to be mikem. The sacrifice has to come from you. You have to sacrifice yourself. In the offering of the animal, you have to bring your animal. Every person has an animal within. Either a bull or a sheep. There's different types of animals, which Alter Rebbe describes pretty vividly in his discourse. What is a bull? A human sheep. It's all kinds of different sacrifices. And there's different natures of animals, animalistic souls that we have. So the choice of words, Adam ki yakriv mikem, God is saying a man who will want to bring a sacrifice, mikem, it's from you that you have to bring the sacrifice. It's from you. That's the why he chose this way of writing it. Because what's the ultimate, what brings the Shekhinah, the essence of the Shekhinah into our world? Subduing and transforming the negative nature. And where was this done? In the Beis Hamikdash, right? What was the main service of the Beis Hamikdash? The sacrifices. What's the sacrifices? Adam ki yakriv mikem, a man who will sacrifice from you, of you. The sacrifice has to be of me, not of the animal. The animal is just a physical manifestation of my own animal. But the real sacrifice has to be of you. You have to offer to Hashem one of your negative natures every time you bring a sacrifice. Your own animal you have to. Mikem, it has to come from within you. That's the meaning over here. Let's read it in his words. The opening phrase should thus be understood as follows. We'll see you. Come at 5. Yeah. The verb used here for bringing an offering is yakriv, which shares a common root with the verb meaning to draw near. Right? What does yakriv mean? How do you say near? Karov, right? Anyone know Hebrew? Karov. He's near. Right? How do you say far? Rachok. Anyone know the Hebrew? Yakriv is the same root as Korev, which means near, to draw near. What is the purpose of a sacrifice? For man to draw near to God. Adam ki yakriv, a man who will want to come close to Hashem. You understand? So how do you get him close? Mikem, when you offer from within you. Let's read it again. The verb used here for bringing an offering is yakriv, which shares a common root with the verb meaning to draw near. And indeed, the function of the sacrifices was to bring one's spiritual faculties and sensibilities closer to God. The opening Hebrew phrase can thus be understood to speak of a man who seeks to draw near to God. That's what a sacrifice is, a man trying to draw near to God, and the irregular order of the words in the verse now allows it to be interpreted as follows. That if a man wants to bring an offering, in other words, if he wants to draw near to God, then this is from you, dependent on you. The possibility and responsibility for the closeness of a man's connection with God lies within himself.
The individual person.
Yeah. It's not the sheep that you're bringing. You got to bring yourself, your own sheep. And then you can bring a physical sheep just to be used in lieu of your own sheep. But you have to bring your own sheep, your own animal. So that's what he's saying over here. Adam ki yakriv mikem. A man who will want to draw near to Hashem, then how do you do it? Mikem, from you. You understand? That's why it doesn't say Adam mikem ki yakriv, a man among you who will offer, because the meaning of it here is much deeper. It's he's talking about man coming closer to Hashem through the sacrifices. How is it done? Mikem, from within you. Let no man say,
I can't handle this stuff.
What part?
This animal sacrifice. I just can't.
But now that you
To
understand
me,
that
it's
it's not,
very
but it's
painful.
not
I
animal, it's the
understand
man's,
it. To
it's the
me-
man's animal. That's the whole point.
I understand that, but in order to bring a sacrifice of an animal, you are an animal, as far as I'm concerned.
That's why you
That's
have
like
to.
the
That's
most evil
exactly right.
thing.
That's why you have to bring your own animal. You're right. That's what the Rebbe is saying over here. Since you have an animal within, everyone has an animal within himself.
Yeah, but
They have to offer that animal and get rid of it.
But you said it's even for Thanksgiving. It's for good. It's not just for sins.
No,
If
not
it was
just for
just
sins.
for sins, I would understand.
No, not.
but
Why
it's
is it
not
just? No, not just for sins. What do you mean? What part would you understand that's for sins?
Well, if you did something bad in order to subdue your evil,
Yeah.
that's a very painful. To me, there's nothing worse.
To subdue your own evil. Why is that so bad?
To sacrifice an animal.
Oh,
Thank
you're talking
God they
about the
don't
killing
do
of
that
the animal.
anymore.
They do
Yeah.
it every day. They're killing animals left,
Well,
right,
I
and
know,
center.
but the whole thing gets me sick.
Oh, you have a problem with the killing of an animal? Well, we'll leave that for a different time. That's not for now. Let no man say, how shall I approach God? He may well know his essential lowliness. A person can say to himself, I'm going to get close to God. I know how low I am. He may well realize to what degree he has tainted his soul through improper conduct. He may well grasp the prodigious distance that he has thereby imposed between himself and God. But in answer to this question, the Torah assures him that your nearness to God is all from you. It depends only on yourself. Don't look for excuses. The excuse is I'm too far, and who am I, and I'm so far from God, and I did so many sins. That's all excuses. If you want, mikem, it's up to you entirely. If you want to get close to God, you could, it's up to you. For it is within the reach of every Jew to say, when will my deeds approach the needs of my forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? You can even say it when a person has to have that desire to reach the level of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Of course, according to our ability, we can't become Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but our deeds could at least. No bounds, blocks, or obstacles, whatever, can prevent a Jew from elevating himself and attaining a closeness to God. Moreover, God does not confront his creatures with unfair demands. That means if God demands this from us, it means that we're able to do it. He's not going to ask you to do something that you're unable to do. Right? But bestows his revelation and his light upon each individual according to his capacity. So when Hashem says that he wants you to bring your offering, he knows you can do it. And you can't say, I'm too far. There's no such thing. It's up to you. If you want, you could become close. In the words of the Medrash Rabbah, when I make demands upon them, I do not demand according to my capacity, but according to theirs. Hashem knows our limitations, and based on that, he makes demands of us, according to each individual's personal potential. Hence, no hindrances can prevent one from rising to attain a closeness to God. There's nothing that can get in your way. You're right. You may have messed up in the past and may have made it even harder to reach this goal. But there's no way, no question you can attain this. You could do this. The first lesson, then, that the verse about sacrifices teaches a man who seeks to draw near to God is that the capacity to do so is mikem, from you. It's up to you. No, don't look for excuses. It's entirely dependent upon himself alone. The same word, however, holds another implication. The sacrificial object to be offered is not only a natural animal, rather, as 3 words of our verse teach, mikem korban lashem, from you shall there be a sacrifice to God. That's why the word from you is later. It's from you is a sacrifice to God. The object that needs to be sacrificed is the animal within a man's heart, his animal soul. That's the real sacrifice. So there's two things that he wants us to know of it. Number one, that a person should know it's available to him. And nothing that you've done in your past could get in the way. You can always make amends with Hashem. You can always come close to him. It's mikem, it's from you, it's up to you. When you want to get close, Adam, a man who wants to get close, Kiyakriv, who wants to draw near to Hashem, it's mikem, it's up to you. And the second thing he's telling you is from where, what do you have to do? Mikem karban Hashem, the next words. From you is this sacrifice to Hashem, your animal soul, not just a physical sheep. Next page. After stating in general terms that the offering to God is to be brought of the cattle, the verse proceeds to enumerate the detailed categories of animal that need to be sacrificed. What are they? Of the herd and of the flock shall you bring your offering. For every man has his own distinctive task of self-refinement. And that's the whole avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. We said, refinement. Everyone has his own little animal, his own different type of animal. One man has to sacrifice an animal nature that is as gross as a goring ox, like a bull. Some people are aggressive. They're like a bull. Another has to cope with an animal nature that resembles a sheep. I'll bite an animal, but at least more docile. The meanings of each of these categories in a man's personal divine service is discussed at length in Kuntras HaTfilah by the Rebbe Rashab. He describes over there in detail what's an ox, what's a sheep, and all these things. But he says it in very short words. An ox is if someone that's aggressive, you have an aggressive nature. The sheep is someone that's a little more tamed, but he's still an animal. Sometimes that's even worse than the aggressive bull. Because at least an aggressive bull, you know what you're dealing with. A sheep is like, you don't even know that it's an animal. He's just quiet. He's, very, meh, bah, you have rachmanus on it, right? The verse closes on the same lines. Takriva es karbanchem. The last words of that verse is, you, plural, shall bring your offering. For each individual has his unique challenge of self-refinement. He's addressing every single person in plural. Because every one of us has a different type of animal that has to be sacrificed. When the offering, you understand what he's saying over here? It's quite clear. When the offering of an actual animal was brought in the Beis Hamikdash, it was sacrificed on the altar, right? That's when they brought the parts. The Talmud in Yuma 21b relates that it was consumed by a divine fire that crouched there like a lion. It says there was a fire that came from above that was always on the altar, crouched like a lion. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it was there always. Rashi explained that a fiery coal fell from heaven during the time of Solomon, and that remained there burning forever. So too the Zohar speaks of a lion that would consume the sacrifice. Okay. So that was the fire from heaven that consumed the sacrifices. This heavenly fire has its counterpart in the divine service that takes place within each man. This is the flame that flares in his divine soul. Because we explained that there are two souls within every man, the godly soul and the human animal soul. The godly soul is a flame that flares. It's a fiery love that has a fire for Hashem. It's a fire. It's a burning fire that has a flaming fire and love for Hashem. This is alluded to in Shir Ashir, the Song of Songs, where it says, "Rishaper Rishbe Yesh Alav is God." Its coals are coals of fire, the flame of God. It's talking about the soul, the Jewish, the godly soul. So that's the heavenly fire within us. So we have the animal, our own nature is our animal, and then there's the godly soul, which is the fire that comes from above to consume the sacrifice. And he explains, he says, Medrash Rabbah, cited in Yalkut, likens this fire to fire from heaven. The fire of the soul is like the fire from heaven. It does not consume water, nor is it quenched by water. Similarly, the fiery love of God in the divine soul of a Jew cannot be quenched. This is alluded to in the next verse in Shir Hashirim, where it says, "Great waters cannot quench the love What does the word quench mean? To squash it, to extinguish it,
To satisfy.
to satisfy it.
It would be quench your thirst.
Quench your thirst, but over here I think it means to extinguish it, to quench, to satisfy it. Okay. Great waters cannot quench the love, nor can rivers drown it. The turbulent waters are the worries of making a living and the other confusing disturbances that distract a person from his divine service, from the study of Torah and from the observance of the mitzvahs. Despite all these disturbances, these are rivers, the currents that drive a person crazy in life. Despite all these disturbances, rivers cannot drown this fiery love of God, for it resembles heavenly fire that nothing can extinguish. So the neshama is always alive. It always has this fire within. In that way, it's considered like the fire, the heavenly fire. Because just like the fire that came from heaven was never extinguished, it burnt there forever, the Neir Tamid, right? It was always on the Beis Hamikdash altar. Nothing could turn it off. Rain, nothing turned it off. The Mizbeach wasn't in the open, it wasn't in the sky, it wasn't in a covered building. The Mizbeach was under the sky. So it could rain and pour and the fire would never be extinguished. It's a heavenly fire, it's not the natural fire. So the same thing, the neshama is a heavenly fire in that way. Nothing can extinguish the neshama. You can be thrown into this physical world with all its disturbances, with all its problems, of making a living, and you're caught up in but the neshama is now, you can't, the neshama always has this burning love for Hashem. Just as a physical offering was consumed by the divine fire on the altar, he continues. Similarly, in the personal sphere, the offering, which is each individual's animal soul, has to be consumed by his personal divine fire. In this way, the animal soul too will be taught to develop a love for God. And isn't that the whole purpose of man's service? To transform the animal soul, to make it an ally to the godly soul? So that's what he's saying over here. Just like the sacrifice in the temple on the altar was consumed, the meat of the parts of the altar, the parts of the sacrifice of the animal that were brought on the altar were consumed by the fire. The real ultimate purpose of all this was that the animal soul, the animal nature within man, should be consumed by the fire of the neshama. What does consumed over here mean? Not destroyed, but transformed. First subdued and then transformed, so that it too becomes a korban Hashem, a sacrifice for Hashem, becomes part of one with Hashem. This is hinted in the wording of the phrase from Shema. It says, what are we saying to Shema? You shall love your God, the Lord your God, with all your heart, right? Now, the word used for your heart is not lipcha, which would be the right way of saying it, but levavcha with two bases, right? The Hebrew, proper Hebrew, it should say b'chol lipcha, with your whole heart. What does levavcha mean? Two bases is extra. That shouldn't be there, the second base. Proper grammar would be one base, lipcha, right? The doubling of the middle letter of the base suggests a plural form, and is thus interpreted by the Talmud to mean that a man is commanded to love God with the whole of your dual heart, with two hearts, with two bases. There's two hearts within man. One is the animal, the godly soul, and one is the animal. You have two loves, two natures. And that's what he's saying. You have to love Hashem with both. It's not only the neshama has to love Hashem. The human soul also has to end up loving Hashem. With both your desires, so that the animal soul too will love divinity. And that's the sacrifice. It's consumed by the fire of the godly soul. This comes about through the enclosement of the divine soul within the animal soul. When we're born, the neshama is sent down, the godly soul is sent down to be enclosed in the body and the human soul, and the neshama is supposed to influence the human soul. For initially, the animal soul has no knowledge of divinity or any sensitivity for it whatsoever. Nevertheless, when the godly soul, which is enclosed in it, meditates on spiritual concepts in a manner in which the animal soul can also comprehend, understand it with your human mind, so that the animal soul can also understand it. That's why it's important. Chassidus, the concepts of godliness have to be articulated in Chabad in a way of understanding, so that the human soul could also understand it. Because that's the whole purpose, to transform the human soul. And your neshama understands it, and your body and human soul have no connection to it. There's nothing. It doesn't influence it.
Right. Which is a lot of people.
It's not they have. You have to teach. Yeah.
Right.
But the point is that godliness has to be articulated, has to be brought down to the level of the human soul,
Right.
that it too can understand the greatness of Hashem. So then the animal soul draws nearer to them, as is explained elsewhere. Let's finish this chapter. As is explained elsewhere, a pervasive impression is thereby made upon it that divinity is comprehensible. What is the nature of the humans, the animal nature? What's its nature? Self-centered. It wants things that it likes, that's good for it. If you can convince it that godliness is good for it, it'll love godliness. It's not an enemy of God. The Yetzer Hara is an enemy of God. But your human soul is not an enemy of God. It loves itself. It loves why does it love ice cream and good movies? Because it's nice. It's interesting. It tastes good. It's stimulating for the mind. You know, if you can tell it that a Chassidic discourse is just as pleasurable as a movie, it'll learn Chassidus. That's what it takes. It doesn't have it's not an anti-God force within you. It's self-centered. It convinces it that this is good for self. It'll run after it too. It'll pursue it. This continues to the point that the animal soul is transformed from its bestiality. It is elevated and consumed by the fiery coals of the divine soul's yearning for God, just as the animal offered in the Beis Hamikdash was consumed by the fire on the altar. This is the sublimation spoken of in the verse, there are many harvests in the strength of an ox. In this verse, it seems to indicate that the power of the ox is even, when you get the human soul, the animal soul, to be an ally, it overruns the godly soul. It has more power. It gives even it adds something to the power, to the godly soul also. Because an ox is stronger than a man. An animal is much stronger than a human. If you can get that power to serve God, you have a whole different experience. It's much more powerful. You understand? If the animal soul is now interested in godliness, it pushes much, much stronger than the godly soul in a sense. It's like a raging bull towards godliness. So you've accomplished something great. A man can harness the power of his animal soul to the service of God. In the Beis Hamikdash, one of the purposes of the offerings was the refinement of the world. The offering of a physical sacrifice caused the godly sparks invested within the mineral, vegetable, and animal components of the world to be refined and elevated. Similarly to the offering of the spiritual sacrifice within oneself refines and elevates the animal soul and transforms it into its darkness into light. Let's just finish up. We'll elaborate on this again next time. In this manner, they shall make me a sanctuary and I shall dwell within them. Within each individual, this is accomplished through his divine service of subordinating his animal nature, particularly in the manner that leads to its transformation. But then, as the Zohar states, when the Sitra Achra is subdued, the other side is subdued, the glory of God rises thereby and is diffused throughout all the worlds. This refers to the revelation of the transcendent light, which was called Seva Kolaman, as we learned in the first chapter. But next time we will redo these two chapters so we can understand it better. Yashar Koach, everyone.
Yashar Koach.
Yeah.